Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining AdminPart1.avi.com. This is SQL Server Database Administration Chapter 1. In this lesson we'll see introductory remarks, we'll define SQL Server Database Administration. We'll also see different tools that are applicable for SQL Server Database Administration. In addition to this, we'll see index, both SQL Server and cluster and non-cluster index in SQL Server 2008. We will see XML index, spatial index, filtered index, and index views. And we will also see how can we create indexes using SQL Server Management Studio. In addition to this, we will see the fragmentation and fill factor. After that, we'll summarize what we learned and we'll finish. Stay with me and then let's go ahead. Okay. The first thing that we should understand is that what is database administration? What's database administration? When we are talking about database administration, it is a mechanism of controlling the security, creating a backup, finding a way to solve a disaster recovery, and also is a mechanism by which we can increase the performance of SQL Server. So if there is an area that we can do these things, that's called database administration. So database administration in short is a mechanism by which we can administer or we can control the database in a way that the database performance will be very good. We can have a backup if there is anything happen with the database, we can bring it back, and we have to find out a disaster recovery mechanism using SQL Server Database Administration, and we'll see how can we secure our database. If somebody is doing that, that person can be considered as a database administrator. Earlier in our previous chapters, we already saw how can we install SQL Server Database Management Studio and the entire SQL Server Database Management System. And because of that, I will not go through that, but right now I will show you how can we use different tools to perform SQL Server Database Administration. The first tool that we can use is import-export. Import-export is a mechanism by which we can import or export data from one source to another source. For example, if we have Excel data, and then if you like to import that data into SQL Server or vice versa, you have to use import-export data the tool that SQL Server has. Let me show you how can you find that import-export data. You have to come to Start and go to All Programs. When you go to SQL Server, any version that you have, and then there is import-export data for both 64-bit and 32-bit computer operating system. Right now, because I have SQL Server 64-bit, just to identify that, you can right-click on your computer and check if it is 64 or 32. Once you know that, just click on Import-Export, click on Next. You have to specify the data source. For example, if my data source is flat file, I can select flat file. If I want to just import from SQL Server, I have to select SQL Server Native Client 10.0 because that is the version that I'm using. And you have to specify the server name. My server name is local or .dat. And you have to specify the authentication that you are using. For example, if you have SQL Server authentication, you have to click this checkbox, radio button. Otherwise, just leave it as is. And specify the database. Our database is the taxi management system, as we saw earlier. So you have to select taxi management system from here. And when you say next, it will ask you what the destination you want. Then flat file, automatically, when you select flat file, it will bring you where you want to put that flat file. Select this and select in C drive. Let me just put into C drive and let me just create a folder, SQL admin. And then let me just make it taxi info. This is the name of the file that I can dump file into it. I can dump SQL Server table into it. Now, after I do this, I can select the text qualifier is none, but the format is delimited. That means the format that will display out is delimited by a character that we are selecting. Now select this, and then here if you select copy data from one or more table or views, you can select this, but right now let me just write a query. Select the second one and then type this one, select all from, let me just use taxi ID, okay, company number, year, and mileage from taxi. And then once I say next, select tax ID, company number. Okay, let me check what it says. Okay, the statement couldn't be parsed, the different operator couldn't be completed. Okay, let me see. Select taxi ID, company number, your mileage from taxi. Check. Invalid column name, it says invalid column name tax ID, so I have to say taxi ID and then select next. And here the road delimiter is any new line. That means this one is new line. Whenever there is a new line, that means we knew that there is road delimiter. Column delimiter is comma, but the row delimiter and column delimiter by any means cannot be the same. So you have to make sure that you select different delimiters for both. And then you can preview your data right here. And then that's my data. And then I can say next. And there are two options. Either I can create SSIS package so that I can schedule and run. I'll show you what SSIS package is. But I can just select run immediately. It will run and then it will dump my file. 15 rows are extracted. Now, if I come here under C drive, and if I come to SQL Server admin, I can see my taxi information. That's it. And then that is a way how can I use import-export tool from SQL Server to import or export data. The other tools that we can use is the BIS. BIS is Business Intelligence Service, and then that's very important to do SQL Server Reporting Service, SQL Server Integrated Service, and Analysis Service. Reporting Service is a service by which we can generate report, and SSIS is integration service that we can import and export as we did. Plus, there is also another feature that we can use SSIS to convert data, and there is analysis service by which you can analyze three-dimensional data. So both SSRS, SSIS, and analysis service are business intelligence service too. I mean the part of business intelligence service by which we can do that, and there is a chapter by itself, and we'll see that one. But for timing, I will show you where you can find BIS. Click on Programs, select SQL Server. This is called SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio. So you can select from there, and then you can go ahead. The other thing is Management Studio. The SQL Server Management Studio is a tool that SQL Server administrator can use. So in SQL Server SQL Server Management Studio, this is SQL Server Management Studio by which you can manage your data or database. You can administer your data or database. So that is called SQL Server Management Studio. Earlier we saw how can we write script. So Management Studio is like this. So the first thing you can do is just create a new query. And then once you create a new query, you can say use taxi management, and then you can select this, run. Now my taxi management is our active database. Select all from taxi. When we do that, it will automatically create a query. So this is a tool that is called SQL Server Management Studio to write a script in order to create a database, in order to create table, in order to create views, store procedure, and other database objects. Plus, in order to create security, I will show you how you can do security. The other tool is, even though it is under BIS, there are different ways you can access SSRS, SSIS, and analytics service. So analysis service is also here. So if you need to analyze your data, that is three-dimensional data, you can come here and click on SQL Server Analysis Service. The other one is the SQL Server Configuration Tool. As you can see here, configuration tool is a tool by which we can start or stop SQL Server services. There are different SQL Server services. Just to make it clear, let me just explain to you one by one. The SQL Server is a collection of servers that are important for us, and every server has its own service. Like for example, Management Studio has SQL Server service as by itself, and then Reporting Service is a service by itself. SSIS is a service by itself, and Analysis Service is a service by itself, and all these are different services that we can start and stop whenever we need. So as to do that, we have to use Configuration Tool. As you can come here, I can start, click on Start, All Programs, I can go to SQL Server R2, and then Configuration Tool. As you can see here, this is SQL Server Configuration Manager. If we need to configure reporting service, actually we'll come to that when we deal with SQL Server Business Intelligence Service. But right now, SQL Server Configuration Tool is very important to configure or to start or stop different services. As you can see here, once I click that one, it will automatically launch SQL Server the Configuration Manager. As you can see here, there are different services. These are different services that are running. If I need to stop, I can just right click and stop. If I need to write, I can make it right click and then start that service. That means unless the service is running, you cannot do anything. For example, unless SQL Server Express, or in my case SQL Server, this SQL Server is running, I cannot do SQL Server Management Studio. I cannot write script. So as to do anything, you need to have a service. So as to stop or start service, you have to use SQL Server Configuration Manager. The other one is documentation. Documentation is a collection of help file by which we can be helped, and then we can develop, if there is any problem, we can go there and grab a solution. The other one is integration service. As I told you earlier, integration service is under BIS, or you can come to start or programs under SQL Server. You can see the integration service here. The other one is a performance tool. And as a system administrator, as a database administrator, you need to think about the performance of your database. So as to control the performance of your database, you have to go to SQL Server, and then you have to run performance tool. There are performance tuning tools. And here, you can come here and go to performance tool. This database engine, a tuning advisor, and SQL Server profiler are the two tools by which we can ensure performance of database, and we'll see one by one when we are in performance tuning section. But right now, what we saw so far is the different tools that we can use as a database administrator. The first one is import-export data, to import data from one source to another source, and BIS is a business intelligence service that has SSRS, SSIS, and analysis service as components. Management Studio is a studio by which we can write script so as to create a database, so as to create a table, or so as to create view, or even maintain security and other things, and we'll see that one. When we come to analysis service, is a mechanism by which we can analyze three-dimensional data. Configuration tool is a tool useful to configure. That means to stop, to start, and services, and also to configure, to make other configuration like SSRS can be configured through that. Documentation is a help file by which we can get help, and integration service is, as I tried to mention earlier, is a mechanism by which you can exchange data, and you can convert data types, and also you can even run SQL Server reporting service from integration service. The other one is performance tool. Unless we have we keep the performance, our database may not be used appropriately. So as to increase efficiency and effectiveness of our database, we have to use a performance tool. These are the tools. Having seen this, we can directly go to index. The first thing that we should think about indexing is that when we do indexing, we have to think about searching. It's like a book index. At the back of every book, there is an index. If you need a keyword, you can go there and grab that keyword with a page number. That page number will lead you to the content. So indexing in this stream is the same as that one. Whenever you have index, you can enhance searching. So indexing is a mechanism by which we can redirect it to the content of your data in the table or in the view. There are two types of index, clustered and non-clustered index. A clustered index is a way of clustering things together. As an example, if you have taxi ID, company number, and year and mileage in a taxi table, and if you like to cluster all companies' taxis together, you can use cluster index. So when you use cluster index, it's determining the order in which the rows of the table are stored on index. If a table has cluster index, then rows of a table will be stored on a disk in the same exact order as the cluster index. So cluster index determines the order the data can be stored in a database. And the other one, the questions that should come in, when would using a cluster index make sense? When we have a relationship between two tables and create an index in the secondary table, column that is, foreign key, we can use that. Just to make it clear, for example, think this one. Okay, if I have a table that is a taxi table, it has a taxi ID and company name. This is taxi ID. This is a company number, and this is the year of that taxi. So if taxi ID 1 belongs to company number 1 and the year is 2003, if there is another taxi ID 2 belongs to company number 2 and the year is X, and if you have another taxi ID 3 and the company ID is number 1 and you have a year, and if you have another taxi ID 4 and you have a company number of 2, So if you like to cluster or group this company number together, that means 2 should come together and 1 should come together like this. For example, the order will be 1 3, this one is company number 1, and then 2 and 4, and then the company number will be 2 2. So if you need to use this kind, if you need to cluster this for searching purpose, for example, when we send a search, then automatically will search by order, so that time it will enhance searching. So if you need to do that, we need to use cluster index. When is using cluster index an advantage? When we need to cluster or group values. Why it is called cluster index? Because it is clustered. There is nothing. It is clustered, it means group. Because it is grouped, that is called cluster. What is the advantage of using cluster index? It's searching, because it's pointing to the actual data. As you can come here, for example, if we cluster with company and number, when we are just dealing about this, we directly go to the data. So cluster index is directly pointing to the data, and searching is fast. The disadvantage behind this is in inserting. For example, if you insert data in here, for example, if the company number is, there is one the company number has another taxi, when you add in here, it will push everything down. So it will create a problem in indexing. So when you create indexing, make sure that the index key is not the most frequent updated column. So if you have a column that is mostly updated, it's very advisable not to use that. And in cluster index is actually that way. So that's the disadvantage. So whenever you insert data, there will be shuffling, and whenever you delete, update, and modify, there is that's also creating a problem. So make sure that there is no frequent update or delete or insert. If you have that, it's better to avoid. Why can a table have only one cluster index? As I didn't mention that, but let me mention to you. In any table, there will be one and only one cluster index, because that cluster index is pointing to the actual data. So whenever there is one index, it's pointing to the actual data. So the cluster index within one table is only one, and then you will have only one cluster index within a table. When we come to non-cluster index, it is like a cluster index. It has its own value and pointer. It's pointing to the other index. For example, if you have a cluster index in here, if this is a non-cluster index, it is a way of pointing from here to cluster index, and from cluster index to the actual data. So non-cluster index is a second layer. That means it has its own value, and the pointer is pointing to the other key. It can point to the non-cluster index, it can point to cluster index, and after that you can get data from cluster index. Non-cluster index doesn't point to the